The Kansas City Chiefs, a team we all know pretty well, just made a big decision. They placed the franchise tag on one of the best offensive linemen in the game, Trey Smith. Now, we all had our eyes on him. We thought this is the guy who can help solve the offensive line issues for the Bears, but just like that, Trey Smith is off the board. The dream of landing him in free agency is over for the Bears. Or is it? Believe it or not, this could actually turn out to be a blessing in disguise for Ryan Poles, the Bears general manager. Stick with me here because I'm about to explain why this setback might be the very thing that helps turn the Bears into a legitimate contender for the next several years. To really understand why this could be a blessing, let's first talk about where the Bears were coming into this offseason. For years, Chicago's offensive line has been a massive weakness. If you watch the Bears on Sundays, you know how bad it's been. Quarterback Caleb Williams, a highly touted rookie, was sacked a total of 68 times last season. That's the most in the league. In other words, the Bears' offensive line has been a disaster. It's been the main reason the offense hasn't been able to take off, and it's something that absolutely needs fixing if the Bears want to see success in the future. So when free agency was approaching, all eyes were on Trey Smith. He was one of the top interior offensive linemen in the league. He's been a standout player for the Kansas City Chiefs, making multiple Pro Bowls and becoming one of the most reliable guards in football. Smith has been a key part of a Chiefs offensive line that helped them win Super Bowls. He was the kind of player the Bears needed, someone who could step in and immediately upgrade the line. It seemed like a no-brainer, right? The Bears had the salary cap space and they had the need. Bring in Trey Smith, solidify the offensive line, and give Caleb Williams some protection. But then, out of nowhere, the Chiefs placed the franchise tag on him. For those of you who don't follow the ins and outs of the NFL salary cap, the franchise tag is essentially a one-year contract that guarantees a player a huge salary for the season. It's a way for a team to keep a player from hitting free agency and possibly leaving for another team. It's a huge deal for the Chiefs, but for the Bears, it was a punch in the gut. Or was it? Let's take a step back and really think about this. Trey Smith would have been an amazing addition to the Bears. There's no denying that. He would have made an immediate impact on that offensive line, and he would have helped protect Caleb Williams right away. But here's the thing. Signing Trey Smith would have come with a major price tag. I'm talking about a contract worth well over $100 million, potentially locking up a huge portion of the Bears' salary cap. Now, the Bears have a lot of cap space this offseason, sixth most in the league to be exact, but that doesn't mean they can afford to spend it all on one player, no matter how good he is. A big contract like Smith's could have limited the Bears' ability to make other moves. They would have been stuck with a major contract that eats up their cap space, and that could have had long-term consequences. Now that Smith is off the table, Ryan Poles finds himself in a very interesting situation. With that money no longer tied up in a massive Smith contract, Poles has the freedom to get creative. He can redistribute that cap space and use it to address other areas of need, particularly the defensive line. The Bears have struggled with their pass rush for years. They haven't had a consistent presence on the edge in a long time, and that's been a huge issue for the defense. Chicago needs pass rushers who can consistently get to the quarterback and disrupt plays. Without Trey Smith, Poles now has the ability to go after defensive players like Josh Sweat, a talented defensive end who's averaged more than 8 sacks a season over the last 3 years. Sweat could be a huge addition to a defense that desperately needs help getting to the quarterback. He would give the Bears the kind of pass rusher they've been missing for a long time. But that's not all. The Bears also need help along the defensive line in general. They don't have the depth they need, and the unit hasn't been able to generate enough pressure. This year's draft could give Poles the opportunity to address these issues, but signing a player like Sweat in free agency would allow him to focus more on building a balanced roster. The extra cap space could be used to add a few more pieces, players who can provide depth and be contributors for years to come. And let's not forget the importance of the draft. Without Trey Smith in free agency, the Bears will be forced to turn to the draft to address their offensive line issues, and this is where Poles has a chance to really prove himself. In the 2025 NFL Draft, the Bears have the 10th overall pick, which gives them a shot at one of the top offensive linemen in the class. But it doesn't stop there. The Bears also have 2 second-round picks, which means they can go after even more offensive line talent. Poles needs to use those picks wisely. He needs to find 2 or even 3 players who can start right away and solidify the offensive line for years to come. If he can do that, the Bears will be in a much better position to protect Caleb Williams and build a successful offense. Now, let's talk about Ryan Poles as a general manager. He's been in charge of the Bears for a few years now, and his track record has been a mixed bag. Sure, he's made some solid picks like Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon, who are both starters on the defense. But when you look at his overall draft record, it's clear that there's been a lack of consistency. Poles hasn't always nailed it in the later rounds, and that's been a big issue. He needs to do better in the draft, especially this year. The pressure is on him to hit on multiple offensive linemen and build a foundation for the future. This year's draft is his chance to make up for some of the mistakes of the past and set the team up for success. But here's the thing. The Bears roster isn't completely dependent on the draft. Poles still has the ability to make moves in free agency. There are still plenty of players who can help fill out the roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball. By freeing up cap space, Poles can be more flexible in making those moves. He can sign the right players to complement the draft picks he makes and build a well-rounded team that's capable of competing in the NFC. Ultimately, the Bears' success in the 2025 season will come down to how well Ryan Poles navigates this offseason. He has the resources, cap space, draft picks, and flexibility to turn things around. Losing out on Trey Smith was a blow, but it's not the end of the world. In fact, it might just be the opportunity Poles needs to make the right moves and get the Bears back on track. So, while we might not have Trey Smith in Chicago, we can still be optimistic about the future. If Poles hits on his draft picks and makes the right moves in free agency, the Bears could be on their way to building a team that's competitive for years to come. It's all about how Poles handles this setback. He's got the pieces to succeed. He just needs to put them together. And who knows, we might look back on this moment when Trey Smith was tagged by the Chiefs and realize it was the turning point for the Bears' future. The Bears have the resources, the picks, and the ability to build something special. Now it's time for Ryan Poles to show us exactly what he's made of. The future of the Chicago Bears is in his hands. Let's see if he can make it count.